My husband thought it would be funny to leave me behind in a small town in West Virginia. He and his buddies sped off in our rental, laughing like it was some kind of joke. But what he didn't realize, what none of them realized, was that leaving me there wouldn't break me, it would free me. That moment standing on the sidewalk with nothing but my purse and disbelief wasn't just the climax of a petty argument over lunch. It was the turning point of my life. 1 second I was a wife, exhausted from years of biting my tongue, managing a perfect little life back in Charleston. And the next I was a woman stranded in a town I couldn't even pronounce. I told myself he'd come back, that this was just some cruel warning, a scare tactic. But the longer I waited, the darker it got inside and out. The cafe lights dimmed, the locals went home. And the realization settled in like cold air. He wasn't coming back. My cell service was poor, but I tried anyway. 10 calls to Kyle, voicemail, 10 more to his friends, all blocked. I had $95 in cash, no credit cards he had helpfully offered to hold them earlier. The knot in my stomach tightened into something else entirely, resolve. This wasn't the end, not by a long shot. It was only the beginning. I spent the first night in a room above a dusty general store, the kind of place where the mattress springs creak louder than the floorboards, and the tap water runs rusty for a few seconds. It was $42 cash, almost half of what I had left. The woman who handed me the key didn't ask questions. Maybe she saw it in my eyes. I was someone who didn't need pity, just a door that locked. Sleep came in short, jagged bursts. I'd wake every hour hoping for a vibration from my phone, a missed call, a message, something from Kyle. But each time, the screen stared back blank and cold. It wasn't just him, his friends had blocked me too. Pete, Andy, even Marshall, who used to call me sis-in-law. All of them had vanished with him down that winding mountain road. The next morning, the sun rose warm over the hills, but I couldn't feel it. I stepped outside, heart pounding, clutching the strap of my purse like it might anchor me to reality. I wandered through the sleepy town square, hoping to see someone from our tour group, a familiar face, anything, but it was clear they'd moved on, without me. I bought a biscuit and a small cup of black coffee from the diner using crumpled dollar bills. The waitress, a woman about my age with crow's feet and a no-nonsense expression, gave me a long look. She didn't say anything, but she didn't charge me full price either. I lingered on a bench by the post office, checking my phone again and again. I thought about calling my dad. He would wire me money in an instant. One phone call and I could be on a flight back to Charleston by nightfall. But the shame held me back. How could I explain that my husband, the same man who made fancy toasts at Christmas and talked architecture at fundraisers, had left me like luggage on a curb? It would have meant more than admitting I'd made a mistake. It would have meant facing everything I'd let slide for years. The time he hid my design sketches as a joke. The way he always reminded me he paid the bills when I talked about starting my own business. The dinner parties where I played hostess while he networked, always introducing me as his rock, never once as an interior designer. I traded my dreams for his and barely noticed, until now. By the second day, hunger wasn't the hardest part, it was the waiting for someone to rescue me, to come back and say it was all just a big misunderstanding. But no one came. I walked the length of the main street twice. I checked every boutique, every corner market, even peered into the visitor center hoping for a sign of our tour group. Nothing. They were long gone that night. I returned to the general store's guest room and sat by the window, watching the sky go from pink to black. I took off my wedding ring, to carats, cushion cut. Kyle had upgraded it on our 10th anniversary. I remember how proud he'd looked in front of his friends, how much he enjoyed showing me off like a status symbol. Now, I stared at the ring, heavy and cold in my hand. It didn't mean commitment. It meant control. I slipped it into my pocket, wrapped it in tissue, and told myself, tomorrow I find a pawn shop, because I wasn't going back, not like this. Something inside me had started to shift. Maybe it was anger, maybe it was pride, maybe. Deep down, it was the memory of who I'd been before Kyle made me smaller. Whatever it was, I knew this. I might be stranded, scared, and alone, but I was still standing. And I wasn't waiting anymore. In front of the pawn shop, 2 blocks from the town square, staring at the faded open sign. My wedding ring was in my coat pocket, wrapped in tissue. It felt heavier than gold, like it carried every compromise I had ever made, every silence I had ever swallowed. Inside, the man behind the counter didn't ask questions. He appraised the ring with a practiced glance, then disappeared into the back. I looked around at the dusty shelves lined with old fishing gear, pocket knives, tarnished instruments, things once loved, now left behind. When he returned, he counted out $385 in cash. I didn't even haggle. I just nodded, folded the bills into my wallet, and walked out without looking back. I had enough now to get somewhere. The town's small bus station sat behind a gas station. A single electronic sign displayed upcoming departures: Knoxville, Memphis, and one that caught my eye: Savannah, Georgia, by way of Atlanta, with a layover in Asheville. I didn't know why that destination spoke to me, but it felt far enough from West Virginia, and from Kyle's reach. Coastal, quiet, unfamiliar. I bought a ticket for the night bus and waited, sitting on a hard plastic bench with my backpack and the last of my courage. As the sun began to dip behind the hills, I powered on my phone, not to call anyone, but to check the map, to orient myself. I stared at that blinking blue dot on the screen, a dot that said, "Here you are, here you still are." And for the first time, I thought, maybe that's enough. When the bus rolled in just after 7 p.m., I climbed aboard and found a seat near the back. The overhead lights buzzed and the heater wheezed, but I was grateful for the motion, for the hum of tires on pavement, for the sense that I was finally moving toward something, anything of my own choosing. As the bus rolled through the darkness, I pressed my forehead to the window and let the memories come of Kyle's dismissive smirks, his helpful suggestions that I focus on managing the household, the way he took over our finances to make things easier, how I slowly faded in that marriage, how I let myself. And how, now I had a second chance. We stopped in Asheville just after midnight. I grabbed a lukewarm coffee from a vending machine and stretched my legs. A man in overalls nodded kindly at me. I nodded back. No one knew who I was. No one expected anything of me. It was frightening. And it was freeing. By the time we reached Savannah late the next afternoon, I was exhausted but determined. I didn't have a plan, but I had enough cash for a few nights at a budget motel and maybe some hot meals. The humidity hit me like a warm blanket the second I stepped off the bus, and for a brief moment I closed my eyes and just let it wash over me. I'm here, I thought. No one brought me, no one rescued me. I got here on my own 2 feet. I walked 2 blocks to a modest motel and checked in. The front desk clerk, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, handed me the room key and said, "You look like you've been through something." I smiled, the first real smile in days. "Yeah," I said, "but I think I'm just getting started." That night, lying on a stiff mattress under buzzing fluorescent light, I didn't feel lost anymore. I felt unclaimed. Not abandoned, not broken, just unclaimed. And for the first time in my adult life, that felt like power. 2 days after arriving in Savannah, I found myself wandering beyond the city limits. The tourist brochures hadn't interested me. I wasn't looking for carriage rides or ghost tours. I needed space, somewhere quiet. Somewhere that didn't remind me of who I used to be. I walked for miles along back roads lined with moss-draped trees, the Georgia heat settling deep into my shoulders. My water bottle had long since emptied, and the granola bar in my purse was a distant memory. Every step felt heavier, like I was carrying the weight of every choice I had ever made, especially the ones I hadn't. Around mid-afternoon, the world tilted slightly under my feet. My legs buckled, and I dropped to my knees on the dusty shoulder of the road. I blinked at the sunlight filtering through the trees, but it blurred and swirled. I don't remember falling. When I opened my eyes, a weathered woman in a straw hat was leaning over me, fanning my face with a cloth. Her voice was soft and southern, concerned but calm. "You all right, sweetheart?" she asked, gently lifting my head. "You've been out a while." I couldn't speak, but I managed a nod. She helped me sit up and pressed a cool canteen into my hands. The water tasted like metal and kindness. She introduced herself as June, and before I could protest, she looped one arm under mine and said, "Come on, now. You're coming with me." She led me down a gravel drive to a small farmhouse nestled among rows of pecan trees and wildflowers. A wraparound porch hugged the front, and the wind chimes sang as we stepped inside. The place smelled of cornbread and rosemary, comfort and age. Inside, her husband Walter, a quiet man with silver hair and a limp, offered a nod and a folded quilt. No questions, just warmth. June gave me sweet tea, chicken soup, and a place to lie down. I must have slept 12 hours straight. When I woke, I found a fresh set of clothes, soft cotton and clearly worn, but clean, placed at the end of the bed. I tried to leave the next morning. I truly did, but when I stood up, my body protested. My feet were blistered, and my head throbbed. June raised an eyebrow as I reached for my shoes. "You can barely walk. Honey, you'll rest today." No arguing, she said it with the kind of voice that didn't leave room for disagreement, the voice of a mother, or maybe a woman who'd seen too much to waste time on false pride. That day, I sat with her on the porch as she shelled peas. We spoke in pieces, bits of conversation between sips of tea and the rhythm of her hands. I told her only a little, that I'd been left behind, that I wasn't ready to go home, that I needed something else. She didn't press, she just nodded like she understood more than I said. That evening, Walter showed me the chicken coop. "June can't collect eggs like she used to," he explained. "You've got good hands. Gentle." That was how it started. I stayed to more days. Then a week, I helped in the garden, washed dishes, and learned to string beans the way June did, snapping them with precision and stories. In return, they gave me a room, meals, and something I hadn't expected: dignity. They never asked about Kyle, never looked at me like I was broken or foolish. To them, I was just a woman passing through who needed a place to breathe, and slowly, I began to believe that maybe I wasn't a failure, just a soul in transition. The days were simple: chores, quiet meals, radio humming in the background. But in that stillness, I felt something returning. A steadiness in my chest, a lightness in my steps. And for the first time since that day on the sidewalk in West Virginia, I didn't feel ashamed. I felt seen. In the weeks that followed, life on June and Walter's farm settled into a quiet rhythm that wrapped itself around me like an old quilt, patched, imperfect, but warm. For the first time in years, I wasn't racing to keep up with a schedule or performing the part of someone's wife at a dinner party. I was just Alexis, and even that name began to feel different. Lighter. My morning started early, long before the Georgia sun had warmed the dew from the porch steps. June taught me how to collect eggs without startling the hens. Talk to them, she'd say, makes them feel less ambushed. I didn't believe it at first, but sure enough, The soft murmur of my voice calmed them the first time I dropped an egg. She didn't scold me, she laughed, handed me a rag, and said, "Now you've earned your stripes." Walter showed me how to weed the garden without pulling up the carrots, which I did on accident twice. "They hide from you," he teased, "but don't give up. Roots run deep, but they want to be found." I realized he wasn't just talking about carrots. There was no gym here, no yoga mat, no self-care routine. Just work, honest work, the kind that leaves you sore in the best way, at night. My body ached in places it hadn't in years. My lower back, my shoulders, even my palms, but it wasn't the pain of stress or emotional exhaustion. It was proof I'd done something, moved something, built something. I hadn't felt useful in so long. In Charleston, I used to decorate dining rooms with perfect symmetry and neutral palettes, then smile as Kyle's colleagues complimented the calming aesthetic. Here, June let me reorganize her kitchen shelves and rearrange the porch furniture. Nothing fancy, just practical adjustments to make the space flow better. She looked at my work and said, "Girl, you've got an eye. You ever think of doing this professionally?" I almost laughed, almost cried. I'd stopped thinking about interior design as something I could own. Kyle always called it my little hobby. But hearing June, someone who had no stake in my ego, recognized the spark in me again. It felt like a door creaking open after years of being stuck shut. Evenings became my favorite time. We'd sit on the porch, the cicadas humming, and watch the sun tuck itself behind the trees. June would knit, Walter would sip sweet tea or tinker with an old radio, and I would just be. Sometimes I'd bring out my sketchbook, the one I'd buried in the bottom of my bag the night Kyle left me. I started drawing again, the chicken coop, the farmhouse kitchen, the way June's rocking chair caught the light. My lines were rough, but I didn't care. For the first time, I wasn't drawing for approval, I was drawing for me. There was no need to rush, no pressure to impress, and yet something inside me was rebuilding brick by brick, like an old house being lovingly restored. The paint peeled away, revealing the original structure underneath, stronger than it looked, worth saving. One afternoon, as we shelled butter beans at the kitchen table, June glanced at me and said softly, "You've got a good spirit, honey. Just needed a little quiet to hear it again." I nodded, holding back tears. She was right. In the silence, I'd begun to hear my own voice again, faint at first, but growing stronger. This life wasn't glamorous. It wasn't polished, but it was mine, and for the first time in a long, long while, I wasn't mourning who I used to be. I was learning who I still had time to become. It had been just over 2 months since I arrived on June and Walter's porch, sunburned and half-conscious, with nothing more than a pawned ring's worth of cash and a heart full of cracks. Now I knew how to milk a goat without getting kicked, how to preserve figs in mason jars, and how to listen to the sky and guess almost accurately if we'd get rain before dusk. But nothing prepared me for what June and Walter said that Wednesday afternoon. We were sitting under the old pecan tree behind the house, snapping green beans into a metal bowl while Walter sanded down a piece of driftwood he'd been turning into a bench. June paused, looked over at him, then turned to me. "We've been thinking," she began carefully, the way someone does when they're about to ask something big. "Walter and I aren't getting any younger. The work's heavier each year, and the kids," she trailed off. I knew what she meant. They had 2 grown children, one in Seattle, one in New Jersey, both busy, both absent, both kind on the phone, but distant in person. Walter set down his sandpaper and looked me square in the eyes. "We think you're meant to be here, Lex." I blinked. What do you mean? "We want you to have the farm," June said gently, her hand still moving through the beans. Not all at once, we'll still be around, but we want to start teaching you everything, the soil, the books, the machinery, the business side of things. You've got the heart for it, and the head. I sat frozen, 1,000 emotions rose. At once gratitude, disbelief, fear, you barely know me. I whispered, I just showed up. June smiled, and you stayed, that counts for something, Walter nodded. It's not just what you do, it's how you do it. This place matters to you. We can feel it. I didn't know what to say. I had no degree in agriculture. I'd never managed a payroll, filed farm taxes, or even changed oil on a tractor. But I had learned, quickly, honestly, humbly, and more than anything, I had fallen in love with the land, its stubbornness, its cycles, its quiet generosity. Still, I hesitated. What if I mess it all up? Walter grinned. Then you fix it. June reached over, resting her hand over mine. This isn't about perfection, sweetheart. This is about legacy. And we think you're part of ours now. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table long after they'd gone to bed, staring at the ledger book June had left out, the same one she'd been using for years to track crop yields and egg sales. The pages were neat, but worn. Generations of hands had likely touched this land, but none in recent years. The idea of becoming part of something older than myself, something real and rooted, it stirred something in me I hadn't felt in decades. Belonging. I thought about Charleston, about Kyle and the sleek brownstone and the life that had always looked good in photos. I thought about the friends I hadn't called back, the design career I'd put on pause, and the dreams I'd shelved so neatly I'd nearly forgotten they were mine. And now here I was, with dirt under my fingernails, sun on my skin, and a chancer. Real chance to build something lasting. Not for someone else, for me. The next morning, I found June in the garden, her wide-brimmed hat shielding her from the rising sun. I'm scared. I told her honestly, but I want to try. She didn't say anything, just reached over, handed me a pair of gloves and said, "Good, tomatoes are ready to be staked. Let's get to it." And just like that, I said yes, not with words, but with my hands, my time, and my willingness to plant roots in soil I never meant to find. It was a Thursday morning when the past came knocking. Literally. I was in the barn, sorting eggs into cartons when Walter walked in, his brow furrowed in a way I hadn't seen before. "There's a man at the end of the drive," he said quietly, "wearing slacks to clean for this place." My hand stopped mid-motion, a strange cold spread through my chest. I already knew who it was before I even turned to look. Kyle. I walked out into the sunlight and saw him standing beside a sleek black rental SUV, his arms crossed, his expensive watch glinting in the Georgia sun. His khakis were pressed, his shirt tucked and ironed, and his hair carefully styled like it had been just another day back in Charleston. But it wasn't just another day. Not anymore. When he saw me, his expression faltered. I must have looked completely foreign to him. Sun-browned skin, faded work jeans, boots covered in dry mud. My hair was tied back loosely. No makeup, no designer accessories, just me, and I had never stood straighter in my life. "Alexis," he said, trying to smile, "you've been hard to find." I wasn't hiding, I replied evenly. "You just weren't looking in the right places." He took a few steps forward, eyes scanning the property, unimpressed. "Look, I know things got out of hand, but it's time to come home. Let's stop pretending you belong out here." That word home rang so false coming from him, I nearly laughed. "You mean the house you abandoned me from?" I asked calmly. "The life you built around your image and left me to decorate?" He opened his mouth, but I didn't let him speak. "You left me on a sidewalk in West Virginia, Kyle. Not a phone call, not a message, nothing. And now you're here with your rental car and your rehearsed lines, expecting what? That I'll Pack a bag and apologize for not waiting at the curb. His expression darkened. You're overreacting. It was a mistake. A stupid one. I was drunk. You know I didn't mean for you to be gone long enough to build a life without you. I finished. He blinked. What is this, Lex? Some kind of phase. Playing farmer in the middle of nowhere. I took a step closer. This is not a phase. This is a place where I'm respected, where my work matters, where I matter. He glanced toward the house, clearly irritated now. These people what? They're manipulating you. You think they care about you more than I did. I laughed then, a soft, sad laugh. Kyle, they didn't need me to make them look good at cocktail parties. They needed a hand in the garden. Someone to help collect eggs. Someone who showed up and stayed. They didn't try to change me. They just gave me space to remember who I was. His shoulders slumped, but his voice sharpened. You're making a mistake. You're throwing away everything we built. No, Kyle, I said, my voice firm. You threw it away the moment. You treated me like baggage. I just finally stopped trying to pick it up. From the porch, I saw June step into the light, not to interfere, but to stand nearby like a quiet wall behind me. I felt stronger knowing she was there, knowing I wasn't alone anymore. Kyle followed my gaze, then looked back at me. So this is it, I nodded. I filed for divorce. You'll receive the papers next week. He stared at me, stunned, maybe for the first time. He realized I wasn't bluffing. He turned without another word, climbed into his car, and drove off, his tires crunching on the gravel like punctuation at the end of a sentence. I stood there for a long moment, breathing, not shaking, not crying. Just solid. And as I turned back toward the house, toward June, toward the life I'd built with my own two hands, I realized I hadn't just survived, I had reclaimed myself. Kyle's visit could have shattered everything I had built, but it didn't. Single quotes T. Instead, it confirmed what I already knew in my bones, that I wasn't the same woman he had left behind on that street corner months ago. In the days that followed, life on the farm returned to its usual rhythm. The chickens still needed feeding, the garden still needed tending, and the sun still rose over the pecan trees, as if to say, you've made it through the night again. But something within me had shifted, not like a sudden earthquake, but like the slow turning of the tide. I wasn't just helping out on the farm anymore, I was a partner. June handed me the new ledger and let me take over the bookkeeping. Walter began showing me how to repair the fencing and keep track of seasonal rotations. We even discussed branding, how to turn their small batch pecan oil and preserves into a line sold at local markets. I began sketching a new label design one evening on the porch. Nothing fancy, just something real, something that carried the heart of the place, and for the first time in years, I felt creative again. Some evenings, I'd sit quietly at the edge of the field and think about my old life, not with anger but with clarity. That version of me, the woman who once tiptoed around someone else's ego, no longer existed. She had walked through abandonment, loneliness, shame, and found something better on the other side. Herself. I wasn't defined by being a wife, or someone's accessory, or even a victim. I was defined by what I chose to become every day, with muddy hands and a full heart. One morning, I caught my reflection in the window. There were laugh lines where stress lines used to be. My shoulders stood straighter, my eyes were softer, but somehow brighter. I didn't need a perfect outfit or a polished home to feel valuable. I had rebuilt myself from the ground up and I liked who I had become. I wasn't running anymore. I had arrived. Sometimes the people who break us think they're teaching us a lesson, but what they don't realize is we were never meant to be broken, only reshaped. Life may strip everything away, your title, your marriage, your comfort zone. But if you're willing to face the unknown with honesty and courage, you just might find that losing everything was how you finally came home to yourself. If this story touched something in you, leave a comment below. Have you ever had to start over? What helped you reclaim your strength? And if you believe in the power of second chances, of quiet bravery, and the strength we find in the most unexpected places, subscribe to our channel so you never miss another story of resilience, healing, and hope, because your next chapter might be waiting just around the corner, and you deserve to step into it with open arms.